there is a dead crow on the ground, and another crow lands beside it, then another, and another. They do not fly away. They do not eat. They stand there, in silence, in a circle, watching something most of us have never allowed ourselves to believe an animal could watch. The end of one of their own. You have probably walked past something like this and not known what it was. A strange gathering of black birds on a quiet street. A cluster of them in a field, motionless as if they were waiting for something. You might have thought it was random, a coincidence, just birds being birds. But what if it wasn't? What if you were standing at the edge of a ritual so ancient, so psychologically complex, that it forces us to ask questions we aren't entirely ready to answer? What does it mean to understand death? Not to fear it instinctively. Every creature flinches from danger, but to understand it, to recognize that something that was alive is now permanently gone, to gather around that absence and mark it. That's something else entirely. And for a long time, we were certain only humans could do that. We were wrong. In the summer of 2015, a researcher named Kaylee Swift stood in a park in Seattle and watched a group of crows do something that changed the direction of her scientific career. She and her team had placed a dead crow on the ground, part of a controlled study, and within minutes, crows from the surrounding area began arriving. Not to investigate it curiously, not to eat it. They arrived, and they gathered, and they went still. Some of them called out with a sound researchers describe as distinctly different from their alarm call. Lower, slower. Something that, if you heard it without knowing what it was, might make the hair on your arms stand up. Swift called these events crow funerals, not as a metaphor, as a documented behavioral phenomenon. And the more her team studied them, the stranger and more layered they became. Because the crows weren't just gathering around the body. They were learning from it. What they discovered about what crows take away from these gatherings changed what we thought we knew about animal cognition entirely. When a crow encounters a dead member of its species alongside a human, it remembers that human's face, specifically, individually. For years, in experiments where researchers wore masks while handling dead crows, the birds later dive-bombed, scolded, and harassed anyone wearing that same mask while ignoring every other human around them. They taught other crows to react the same way. The information spread through the flock like a warning passed through a community. This person is associated with death. Avoid them. Tell the others. Let that settle for a moment. The crow standing on your fence on a Tuesday morning may be holding information about a face, an event, a loss. Information passed down not through instinct, but to something that looks uncomfortably like memory, like testimony, like mourning that has a practical consequence. To understand why crows gather around their dead, you have to understand something about how crow society actually works. And most people don't know this, because crows are everywhere, and because something that is everywhere tends to become invisible. Crows are not solitary creatures moving randomly through the world. They live in complex social structures built over years. They form long-term pair bonds. They remember individual relationships the way we do, with nuance, with history, with accumulated meaning. A crow that you see alone on a wire is almost certainly not truly alone. It is embedded in a web of relationships, a partner, offspring from previous seasons, siblings, rivals. It is known for a decade. When one of those individuals dies, something real is lost from the social world of every crow that knew it. And the gathering, the funeral, may be how the flock processes that rupture. Studies suggest these events help surviving crows update their understanding of the environment. They are not just grieving, they are gathering information about what killed their companion. Was it a predator? A human? A particular location? The funeral may be, at its core, a survival mechanism dressed in the clothes of mourning, which makes it no less moving, perhaps more so. Because what is human grief at its deepest evolutionary root, if not the same thing? We gather around our dead for reasons both emotional and practical. We mark the loss, yes, but we also transmit information. We tell stories about how the person lived and how they died. We update our understanding of the world. We warn each other in coded language about what is dangerous and what is fragile. The crow standing vigil over its fallen companion is doing something that is structurally, eerily similar. The difference may be one of complexity and consciousness, but the architecture is the same. Here is the question that researchers have been circling for years, the one that sits at the center of all of this like a dark and patient thing. Do crows understand that death is permanent? This is not a simple question. Understanding permanence, grasping that something that was alive will never be alive again, requires a particular kind of cognitive architecture. It requires the ability to model the future, to hold an absence in your mind and recognize it as absolute rather than temporary. Most animals don't appear to have this. A dog waiting at the door for an owner who has died is not demonstrating an understanding of death. It is demonstrating the absence of that understanding, an expectation that has simply not yet been updated. But crows appear to be different. Research into corvid cognition, the family of birds that includes crows, ravens, jays, and magpies, has produced findings that are genuinely difficult to explain without attributing something like forward-thinking awareness to these animals. They plan for the future. They hide food not for immediate consumption, but for retrieval days later. And they account for the possibility that they were watched while hiding it. They use tools. They solve multi-step puzzles. They recognize themselves in mirrors, a test that only a handful of species on Earth can pass, including great apes, dolphins, elephants, and humans. A crow looking in a mirror does not attack its reflection. It investigates it. It touches the mark on its own body that the mirror reveals. It understands at some level that the image is itself. That is not a small thing. That is the beginning of a self. And a creature with a self is a creature for whom the loss of a self in another might carry weight. And then there is what ravens do, which is something even researchers speak about quietly. Ravens, the larger, darker cousins of crows, have been observed doing something that goes beyond gathering. When a raven dies, its partner sometimes stays near the body for hours, sometimes days. It does not eat. It calls out with a sound that ethologists describe as unlike any other vocalization in the raven's repertoire. A sound that has no obvious survival function. A sound that exists, as far as anyone can determine, for the purpose of expressing something that has no other outlet. In one documented case from a wildlife sanctuary in Austria, a raven whose mate had died was observed bringing objects, small stones, pieces of wood, and placing them near the body. Not eating them, not using them, placing them, as if marking a site, as if leaving something behind. There is a philosopher named Thomas Nagel who wrote a famous essay asking what it is like to be a bat. His argument was that subjective experience, consciousness, inner life is fundamentally inaccessible from the outside. We can study a bat's sonar, we can map its brain, but we cannot know what it feels like to be inside that experience. The bat lives in a world of sound and echo that we have no perceptual access to whatsoever. The same problem applies here, but with a particular ache. We can watch a crow standing over its dead companion. We can measure the electrical activity in its brain. We can document its behavior with extraordinary precision. But we cannot know what it is experiencing. We cannot know if there is grief behind those black eyes, or something that has no human name, or nothing at all that we would recognize. And yet, the behavior is there. The gathering is there. The calls unlike any other. The memory of faces associated with death, carried for years. The placing of objects near a body. These things are happening in the world outside our uncertainty. Whatever is driving them, whatever that inner experience looks like, if it looks like anything, it has shaped these animals into something that stands at the edge of what we thought was exclusively ours. The most uncomfortable possibility is not that crows understand death the way we do. It is that they understand something about death that we don't. They approach it practically, without denial, without the elaborate architecture of belief systems built to make the permanence of death bearable. A crow does not construct a theology around loss. It gathers the information loss provides. It integrates it. It moves forward carrying the knowledge of what was lost, and who is responsible, and how to survive in a world where that loss has occurred. There is something almost clarifying about that. A kind of brutal honesty that we spend enormous amounts of cultural and psychological energy avoiding. The crow stands in the truth of the moment. The body is here, the life is gone, the world is changed, and it updates accordingly. That is not less than what we do. In some ways, it is more honest. If you have a yard with a feeder, or a neighborhood with old trees, or even just a regular morning walk that takes you past the same stretch of sidewalk, there is a very real chance that some of the crows you see regularly know your face. Not as a vague shape, as an individual. They have filed you away in a memory that is, by animal standards, extraordinarily precise and durable. They have categorized you. They may have even discussed you, in whatever way crows discuss things, with other crows in the area. Most people move through the world assuming they are unobserved by animals beyond the moment of contact. But crows are watching you the way you might watch a neighbor you're not sure about, with attention, with ongoing assessment, with a mental file that gets updated every time you appear. The crow on your fence is not passive scenery. It is an observer with a history of you, a living record of every time you passed by, every time you left food, every time you moved too quickly or looked directly at it for too long. And if something happens near those crows, if there's death or danger or an event that breaks the ordinary pattern, they will remember how you factored into it. For years, possibly for the rest of their lives, possibly in the lives of their offspring, if the information is passed along, as researchers now believe it is. We began here with a circle of crows around a body on the ground, a gathering that most people walk past without stopping, a ritual that we don't have a language for, because we designed our language around the assumption that we were the only ones who needed one. But the crows were always doing this, long before we had words for mourning, long before we built the first stone marker over the first grave. Crows were gathering, standing in their circles, making their sounds that served no purpose other than to mark the moment. They were processing something enormous inside a small black body, looking down at what was once one of their own. We don't know exactly what they understand. We may never know. The inner life of a crow is as inaccessible to us as ours would be to them. But the behavior is real. The gathering is real. The memory is real. The face they remember, years later, of the person who stood near the body of their companion. All of it is real and documented. And sitting quietly at the edge of everything we thought we knew about which creatures in this world are capable of feeling the weight of a loss. The yard looks ordinary. The crow on the wire looks ordinary, but it is carrying something. And now you know what it might be. The next time you see a gathering of crows standing motionless around something on the ground, don't look away. Don't hurry past. Stay for a moment. Because you are witnessing something that took millions of years to evolve. A behavior so layered with intelligence and social meaning that researchers are still working to understand it. You are watching animals grapple, in their own way, with the same truth we have always struggled to face. That life ends. That loss is real. That the ones left behind must somehow continue in the changed world that loss creates. And if a crow turns and looks at you, really looks at you, in that specific held way they have, it already knows whether you belong in its memory of safety or its memory of danger. It has already made that calculation. It has already filed you away. The only question is which file, which means that how you move through the world, even past something as small and unnoticed as a gathering of birds on a quiet street, might matter more than you ever thought. Not because the crows are judging you in any moral sense, but because they are watching. They have always been watching. And they remember everything. Have you ever come across a gathering like this? Birds standing still around something you couldn't quite see? Or a single crow that seemed to watch you in a way that felt different from other animals? Tell me what you saw. I want to hear it.